Here in the synagogues, our people found the presence of God and the guidance they needed to hallow their lives. And as they entered them, they sang. If you wish to know the fortress to which your ancestors bore their treasure, their scrolls of Torah, their Holy of Holies, if you would know the place of their deliverance, if you would find the refuge which kept your people's mighty spirit safe, whose age, despite the years of degradation, did not disgrace its gracious youth, if you would know all this, turn to the ancient battered house of prayer. There, to this day, your eyes may see Jews with faces lean and lined, Jews of the exile, bearing this heavy weight, forgetting their toil in a Talmud's tattered page, their cares in chanted psalms. How drab and strange a sight to those who do not understand. Your heart will tell you, your feet touch the threshold of our house of life, your eyes behold the storehouse of our soul. If God's Spirit still breathes within you, if still God's solace whispers in your heart, and if a spark of hope for better days illumines the darkness in which you dwell, mark well and hearken, my sister and brother. This house is but a spark, a remnant saved by a miracle from that great fire kept by our ancestors always upon their altars. Who can say, did not the torrents of their tears carry us safely to this shore? Perhaps their prayers were the price of our salvation. And was it not their deaths that bequeathed us life, life enduring, life without end?
God's witnesses, God's servants, generation after generation in times of darkness as in times of light, we have heard the divine word. You shall be to me a people of priests and a holy nation. We have felt the joy of being God's servants. We have also felt the pain, for it has been our destiny to be God's suffering servants.
These things do I remember. Through all the years, ignorance like a monster has devoured our martyrs as in one long day of blood. Rulers have arisen through the endless years, oppressive, savage in their witless power, filled with a futile thought to make an end of that which God has cherished.
The earth's crust is soaked with the tears of the innocent. The blood of every race cries out from the ground, which is the people without its martyrs.
Now, therefore, we honor those of every race and continent, the innocent, the victims, all our companions in death and our partners in grief. Them we honor, them we mourn. May they never be forgotten. May a better world grow out of their suffering.
And especially do we remember the suffering of the house of Israel, a people of pains and acquainted with grief.
Look and remember. Look upon this land, far, far across the factories and the grass. Surely they will let you pass. Speak then and ask the forest and the loam. What do you hear? What does the land command? The earth is taken. This is not your home.
Days and years of peace, these too have been our lot. Grandeur, greatness, quiet ages, domestic joys, times when fear might almost be forgotten. Yet again and again our peace has been shattered, our land usurped, our dwellings razed. The mind grows numb, and the heart turns to stone to see our long travail. Our foes were not content to give us pain. Their dream was darker still, a world without Jews, a world that would forget our very name. We cannot forget this or be indifferent to its meaning. We shall remember.
In the time of Hadrian, Emperor of Rome, the study and the practice of Torah were forbidden. Israel's leaders said, "How survive without the tree of life? Why live when the soul is dead?" And so they taught and learned and did God's will. Israel's 10 leaders were taken and doomed. Shimon ben Gamaliel was slain. Remembering his wisdom and witnessing his death, disciples exclaimed, "Is this Torah and this its reward?" Rabbi Ishmael was next to die. In pain and anguish he cried out, and at his cry the heavens trembled, "Accept this, affirm me, for if you fail, the world must crumble into chaos." Then Ishmael accepted his fate and said, "I will trust in you, even though you slay me."
These things I remember as I pour out my heart, how the arrogant have devoured us.
Akiva had defied the decree and continued to teach. He was among those taken. He was led to his death at the time when the Shema is recited. As his flesh was flayed, he said, "Shema Yisrael." "Even now?" his disciples asked. He replied, "All my life this verse has troubled me. Love your eternal God with all your being. Love God, though you must die for it. I prayed always to be able to fulfill this, and now I can." And with his final breath he said, "Adonai Echad, the eternal God is one," prolonging the last word until life was gone. Thus, in a godless world, was God affirmed.
These things I remember as I pour out my heart, how the arrogant have devoured us.
The Romans had forbidden the ordination of rabbis, decreeing death to ordainer and those ordained, and destruction for any city in which ordination would take place. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava ordained 5 in the hills between 2 cities, Shepharam and Usha. When the enemy soldiers were upon them, Rabbi Yehuda told his disciples to flee. "What will become of you?" they cried. He answered, "I shall place myself before them as an immovable rock." So he did, and the Roman lances struck him down, but the disciples escaped. The 10 included other teachers, 10 teachers among many. Dying, they did not perish. Their faith is immortal, their God eternal.
These things I remember as I pour out my heart, how the arrogant have devoured us.
In the days of the Crusades, whole communities of Jews were massacred in the Rhineland. In one city, young and old donned armor and stood behind their leader, Rabbi Kalonymus ben Meshulam. The gate was smashed. Their friends had fled, and death reached out with sword and fire. They said to one another, "Let us be strong and bear the yoke of our holy faith, for only in this world can the enemy kill us." In another city, as the flames mounted high, the martyrs began to sing a song that began softly but rose to a crescendo. Those who heard it came and asked, "What kind of song is this? We have never heard such a sweet melody." It was the Aleinu. We must praise God of all. So it was for us long ago, and only yesterday we drained once more the cup of sorrow.
A voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children, for they are gone.
How many there are who rest in nameless graves, and how many whose ashes were blown by the winds to every corner of the earth. Even now the air we breathe is thick with the dust of our martyrs. Do the peoples of the world not know that they breathe it still? And how can they not feel the earth trembling beneath their feet as they walk upon ground under which so many were thrust without mercy?
All this has come upon us, yet we have not forgotten you, nor been false to your covenant. For your sake were we slain all the day long, and treated like sheep for the slaughter.
Silence. Where in this Holocaust is the word of God? Not in the storm, nor in the shaking earth, nor in the fire, but only within us. The world was silent, the world was still. And now survivors stammer, their words are haunted. Behind their words, silence. Behind the silence, a witness to the sin of silence. What pains were taken to save cathedrals, museums, monuments from destruction. Treasures of art must be preserved. They are the song of the human soul. And in the camps and streets of Europe, mother and father and child lay dying, and many looked away. To look away from evil, is this not the sin of all good people?
For the sin of silence, for the sin of indifference, for the secret complicity of the neutral, for the closing of borders, for the washing of hands, for the crime of indifference, for the sin of silence, for the closing of borders, for all that was done, for all that was not done. Let there be no forgetfulness before the throne of glory. Let there be remembrance within the human heart, and let there be at last forgiveness, when your children, O God, are free and at peace.
And yet even in the inferno, even there were those we call Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, the righteous of the nations. Some gave their very lives to keep Jews from harm. Who can measure such courage? When so many were afraid to act, they bore witness to the greatness humanity can reach. Look and take heart. If ever such days return, remember them and find courage. Consider what can be done, what must be done, not to banish from our souls the image of God.
Let the righteous who were faithful be remembered for good. By their deeds, they have inscribed themselves in the book of life.
When Leo Beck came out of the black midnight of the concentration camp, he looked about at the world and at his neighbors. Many averted their eyes. They had been silent. They had been selfish, or they had followed the multitude to do evil. In the darkness of the camps, Leo Beck had not despaired. He had fulfilled his function. He had taught, and he had given comfort. And in the darkness of the new world, which had to live with the memory of Belsen and Auschwitz, Beck had continued to teach and to comfort his people. They say that when Beck lifted his hands and spoke the priestly benediction, the congregation felt very close to the divine presence. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious unto you. These words took on new meaning for the worshipers. In ancient times, the image of one Babylonian god was a clay furnace. When the fires of human sacrifice burned high, the eyes of the idol glared death upon the onlookers. To see God was to die. Biblical Israel transformed the terror into awe, and fear became love. In God's light, we saw light. But in our days, the world grew dark again. The pagan furnace roared, and Israel ascended into the sky as smoke. And we who are alive wander across a darkened landscape fitfully illuminated by burning idols in which some exterminate their own human kin. We need our teachers, those who died for the sanctification of the divine name, and those who lived to guide and comfort us. They tell us that the encounter with God can take place in the utmost darkness if we are ready for it. The blessing that shone through Leo Beck can touch our lives. May God look upon us and give us peace.
Say that you now walk the final way, because the darkened heavens hide the blue of day. The time we've longed for will at last draw near, and our steps as drums will sound that we are here. From land all green with palms to lands all white with snow, we now arrive with all our pain and all our woe. Blood spread out and came to touch the land. There our courage and our faith will rise and stand.
After the suffering, we rose up, refusing to die. We rose to tend the wounded and comfort the bereaved, to strengthen old communities and establish new ones, to open new synagogues, to build new schools. And we began to write a new chapter in our old book, continuing the story of Israel, the eternal people. In one land especially, we glimpsed the rays of a new dawn, the land of Zion, made ready for habitation by generations of pioneers. The great day came, Israel, independent at last. The millennial dream, a dream no more. Drawn by its brightness, her children flocked to Israel from distant lands of despair, and there they found hope. Though bent in mourning, they plowed the earth deep so that grain would grow tall. And as they restored the land to its fruitfulness, they began themselves to be restored. Israel lives, a people at home again, rooted in its soil, its way of life, its ancient faith.